League allows you to use the function keys F1 through F5 to center your camera on either yourself or each of your allies. Now, this is a very useful thing, but the hotkeys are not very accessible if you want to retain access to Q, W, E, and R the whole time. So instead, I want foot pedals that I can use to control the camera. The first place I checked online was Amazon, but the selection here is bad and the prices are too high. I want 5 foot pedals, and the highest on here is 3, and the prices I'm just not willing to pay that. And looking at Newegg, it was mostly the same. Not a wide selection, only 3 as the maximum, and pretty bad prices. So since the selection was not really what I wanted, there weren't enough foot pedals, and the price was higher than I think it should be, I'm just going to make my own. And I'm going to use the Arduino Pro Micro as the microcontroller that I'm going to go with, and I'm just familiar with it. It's a pretty easy one to use, it's got enough pins for what I want to do, so that's what I'm going to go with. This project will be very similar to the project that I did in my previous video where I built a joystick control panel from a Pro Micro. But the main difference is that in this case, I'm going to have to actually build the foot pedal mechanisms. And I'm going to be basing them off of these Cherry MX switches because I have them on hand and it's just like, oh, well, this is basically a keyboard, so I might as well use keyboard switches. So I figured the easiest way to do this would be to take a pre-existing 3D model of a keycap and modify it to fit my needs. This part with the plus is where the key is held. So then on the other side, it's just a circle that could easily be stepped on. It's a large surface area compared to a normal keycap.
So I just took this thing off the printer and it actually turned out really good. I think I might want to do it a little bit bigger, but this was a good test print. So here's the bigger one. Here's what it looks like with the key on it. And then I made this little mount for the key. Now here's the whole thing with the key and the mount and the keycap. And now here's 5 of them. I'm thinking this is about how far I'll have them spread out, but I'm gonna need wood to mount it to, and I'm gonna need to put holes in the wood for each of these spots so that the pins I can wire to the pins. Thankfully, this very oddly shaped piece of MDF is big enough. Now I'm considering adding a 6th button to this because there's space for it, and who knows what other sort of hotkey I could be requiring in the future. All right, yeah, I'm gonna do 6. I already have the 6th keycap printed because I printed an extra one by mistake. So I'm just printing the last platform right now. Now I'll measure out the spacing for the wood and measure where I need to cut. All right, I got the lines all marked out. I'm only cutting along the edge. These lines here are just reference lines for me to know where to mount the black pieces. And then these lines, I'm gonna use a hole saw, or these boxes, I'm gonna use a hole saw to cut them out. Here is the wood piece cut out with the holes. Now I've got to screw these things in. And there they are, screwed in. So I assembled this thing and I put it under my desk just to kind of test how it was working and see, how everything was. And 2 problems immediately jumped out at me. For one, these keycaps are way too loose and they come off with just like the wrong touch. It just is really not good for that. Another thing is that the buttons are too easy to press, so if you rest your foot on the button, it presses, which is obviously a problem. So, yeah. So to fix the problem of the buttons being too wobbly, I'm thinking I'm going to use the keycaps like normal keycaps, and then I'm going to have something over top, like that acts kind of like this. And then there's going to be, to solve the other problem, there's going to be some sort of like a tube or something with a spring, and then like a flat platform kind of like this, which has a hinge here. So there's a spring here, a hinge here, and a flat thing here that basically compressed down. I have no idea. We'll see how it goes. So I got this spring kit, and then this is the size of spring that I figured would be best for this. So I have it, I measured it against the button like here, And then I made some 3D models and took some 3D models offline, and I made these two parts right here. So this is a modified version of this, which is able to hold the spring, just like that. And then this is a hinge. It's a hinge with another spring holder on that side. So it can bend like that, and it'll basically, the spring will fit there. This will be, fastened to that piece of wood or whatever, and then the spring will go like that, and then you'll be able to compress it, and the button will be in that hole. The whole new pedal system wouldn't fit on this piece of wood, so I've marked out a new one and made sure it would fit and everything, and so I gotta cut this one out now. This is why it's too short. You see, the screw holes are overhanging off. So I tested this whole new switch pedal system with the actual switch in it, and it seemed to be working like perfectly, exactly what I would want. So I'm gonna need to find a way to mount this because it's not gonna fit on there. So before I actually cut anything out of wood, I wanted to just make absolute certain that this mechanism was gonna work. So I screwed it all in place, and you can see it's working super, super well. Like, everything's really rigid. It takes a good amount of force to press it, so that means I can rest my foot on it without it automatically pressing, so that's good. So I cut this out with the saber saw because the MDF was too big to use the bandsaw. And then I cut one hole out and remembered that I should be doing like a progress report. So since I didn't show you guys last time, this is what I use. Here it is with all the holes done. And I've been printing these foot pedals while working on this. So there's still 2 more to print, and then I'll have to print all the modified versions of these. I transferred the 1 foot pedal over to the new board while I'm still waiting for the other pieces to print. And there we go, there's all 6 done. Alright, so here we go. I have all the pins of the buttons facing up. I have the microcontroller I'm using, which is Pro Micro. And then here is the bundle of wire. I'm just going to cut pieces off of this. I'm going to connect all the grounds to each other, and then connect that to the microcontroller ground. And then I'll connect the other pin, each individual pins on here. I want the board to be placed like this if possible, and I can easily cover it up. I cut the first section of the cable, and then I wired it to here. Then I stripped the middle of that and soldered it to there. So I still have one solid piece. I plan to just keep stripping the middle section and connecting it to the pin, and just do that all the way, and then cut it at the end. Here's the ground all wired up, and now I'm going to start wiring the pins from each key. And there we go, now it's all wired up. Now I'm going to clean up the wiring and use some hot glue as like insulation. Well, there we go, it's all glued up, but I've made a really big mistake in the order in which I've done things if there's something wrong with the wiring. So I should have already like uploaded code to the microcontroller and like made sure everything was good and like tested it, then glued it all up, because man, if something's wired improperly now, it's going to be a lot of work to fix it. And here's the other side. The microcontroller is kind of just sitting there for now, but I might make like a little 3D printed box to cover it up or something. I don't know.
So here is the code that I uploaded to the microcontroller. I will also include a link to it in the description if for whatever reason you really want to use it, if you want to like make your own or whatever. I just based it off of the example code that's provided in the keyboard library and a couple like Google searches. But yeah, so it's pretty simple, but if you want it, it'll be there. So if you want to just use my code like straight up, this is how I have my thing wired. The F6 button is what I have the last button bound to. But yeah, these are the pins that I have each of the switches bound to. And then also like so the one side of the switch is bound to pin 2, the one side of this switch is bound to pin 3, and then the other side, all of them are tied to ground, as you saw me wire it up, but just to kind of explain it.
So I was talking to my dad about how I wanted to cover up this wire with something, and he told me he had this like rubber mat stuff left over. So I'm gonna just roll this out, and I'll glue it down to that. I think it'll be perfect. Here's how the bottom looks now. Now the wiring's not exposed or anything. So now I think I just want to make an enclosure for this part right here. Don't end this. It just snaps back in place. Now here is that final piece. And you can see pretty much covers up all the wiring. So now there's no exposed wiring and we are finished. Okay, so now I have the foot pedals all hooked up and let's just test it out. So this is Selfcast. This should go to Ash, then this should go to Lux, then Vigar, then Darius. And you can see in the right half of the screen, right above the mini map, you can see who it's going to go to. And if you rearrange people in the tab menu, you can switch the order of who it is. So I mean, it's working very well. And I think when it comes to like getting used to it, it'll be incredibly efficient because for now it's a little bit weird to use, but I think with enough time, it'll become very, very natural. But yeah, so that's basically it.
I'll leave a link to all of the files in the description, like the 3D models and the code and all that. And feel free to leave a like or a comment on the video if you feel like it.